There is a road in eastern Spain that connects two small towns in the province of Valencia. It is not a famous road. It doesn't appear on travel guides or tourist maps. For most of its existence, it was just a road, the kind you drive 1,000 times without giving it a second thought. But on the night of Friday, November 13th, 1992, 3 teenage girls walked onto that road. They were heading somewhere with music and laughter and the ordinary joy of being 15 years old on a Friday night. They never arrived. What happened next would shake an entire country to its core and leave questions that, in some ways, remain unanswered to this day. This is the story of Miriam, Tony, and Desiree. Alcàsser, a small municipality in the province of Valencia in eastern Spain. In 1992, fewer than 6,000 people lived here. It was the kind of place where neighbors knew each other by name, where doors were left unlocked, and where parents felt their children were safe. 3 of those children were best friends. Miriam Garcia Iborra was 14 years old. By all accounts, she was bright, warm, and full of life, the kind of girl who kept her friends laughing. Maria Deseada Hernández Folch, known to everyone as Desiree, was also 14, quiet, thoughtful, and deeply loved by her family. And Antonia Gomez Rodriguez, Tony, was 15, the oldest of the 3. Tony had that easy confidence that comes with being just a few months ahead of everyone else. They had known each other for years. They were, in every sense of the word, inseparable. The evening of Friday, November 13th, 1992, began like countless evenings before it. According to accounts later gathered by investigators, the 3 girls had spent part of the afternoon at the home of another friend, a girl named Esther. They were planning for the night ahead. There was a party at the Cooler nightclub, a discotheque located just outside the neighboring town of Picasso, roughly 2 kilometers from Alcàsser. It was a venue popular with young people from several nearby towns, a school event, a chance to dance, to see classmates, to feel for a few hours like the world was full of possibility. At 8 o'clock in the evening, the 3 girls said goodbye to Esther, who had stayed behind with a cold, and stepped out into the cool November air. Before leaving, Miriam had called her father. She asked if he could drive them to the Cooler, as he sometimes did. But that evening, her father had come home from work with a fever. He was already in bed. The girls decided to make their own way. The distance was not great, just 2 kilometers. But the road between Alcàsser and Picasso was not well lit. The final stretch in particular was dark. There were no houses alongside it, just fields and silence, and the occasional pair of headlights sweeping past. It was a road the girls knew. Many young people hitchhiked along it on weekends. On Friday and Saturday nights, it wasn't unusual to see teenagers standing at the roadside, thumbs raised, waiting for a neighbor or a familiar face to stop. According to witness accounts later reviewed by investigators, the 3 girls were seen making their way toward Picasso that evening. A young couple reported that they had stopped their car near the edge of Alcàsser and given the 3 girls a lift, dropping them at the petrol station at the entrance to Picasso. Another witness, a young man from Alcàsser who was returning from the Cooler that same night, said he saw them walking in the direction of the club, and a woman in Picasso later told police that from her balcony she had watched the 3 girls standing below, trying to hitch a ride. According to her account, a small white car stopped. There were already several people inside. She watched the 3 girls climb in. The car pulled away, and Miriam, Tony, and Desiree vanished. By 10 o'clock that night, the Cooler nightclub had closed. The girls had not arrived. At home, their families waited. An hour passed, then 2. According to those who were there, the silence began to feel wrong. The girls had left with almost no money. They hadn't packed anything. There was no note, no message, nothing to suggest they had gone anywhere other than where they said they were going. By midnight, The families had begun to make calls to friends, to the club, to anyone who might know something. No one did. By the following morning, the families had reported the girls missing to the authorities. The search, initially local, began immediately. Volunteers from the community joined officers combing the roads, the fields, and the surrounding countryside. Civil protection volunteers, local residents, and emergency services worked together across the land surrounding Alcàsser and Picassent. The search was not without tragedy. According to reports from the time, on that same Sunday, just 2 days after the girls disappeared, 2 civil protection volunteers who were participating in the search were struck by a vehicle in the barrancas near Picassent. One of the men, 26 years old, died at the scene. His companion, aged 35, was hospitalized with severe injuries, including a skull trauma and 14 bone fractures. He survived, but with lasting consequences. The investigation was already, in the words of those who lived through it, unlike anything Alcàsser had ever known. The town of Alcàsser produced thousands of printed posters bearing the girls' photographs, their names, and any identifying details that might help. The images spread across the region, then across Spain. Within days, the case had attracted the attention of national media. Television programs dedicated broadcasts to the search. Newspapers carried the photographs on their front pages. And across the country, ordinary people began calling in to say that they thought they had seen them. Hundreds of reported sightings came in from across Spain, from Granada to Pamplona, from the coast to the interior. Police mobilized resources in multiple cities to follow up on the most credible leads. According to investigators, however, the most consistent and credible accounts all pointed to the same area, the road between Alcàsser and Picassent, on the night they disappeared. Beyond that moment, nothing. Within weeks, the search for the 3 girls from Alcàsser had become a national story. Spain in the autumn of 1992 was a country in a moment of change. The Barcelona Olympics had taken place that summer. The country felt, to many, like it was stepping into a new era. And then, into that optimism, came this. The case struck something deep in the national consciousness. 3 teenage girls, a small town, a routine Friday night that had gone terribly, incomprehensibly wrong. The response reached the highest levels of government. According to contemporary reports, José Luis Corcuera, Spain's Minister of the Interior at the time, took a personal interest in the case and met with the families of the missing girls. His ministry formed a joint task force combining personnel from the Guardia Civil and the National Police with the specific purpose of coordinating the search. On Christmas Eve, more than 5 weeks after the girls had disappeared, the president of the government, Felipe González, received the 3 families. According to those present, he told them he shared their concern not only as a head of government, but as a father. The search had also expanded beyond Spain's borders. Interpol had been informed. Posters in multiple languages were distributed across parts of Africa and Europe. One investigative thread had even led to Morocco, a lead later unverified, suggesting the girls might have been taken across the Mediterranean. According to contemporary accounts, on the day the case broke open in a way no one had expected, Miriam's father, Fernando Garcia, was in London with journalists, still working to spread news of the search. 75 days had passed since the girls disappeared, 75 days of searching, of hoping, of waiting for a phone call that might bring good news. That call never came. What came instead was something else entirely. In the weeks following the disappearance, investigators had reconstructed, as best they could, the movements of the 3 girls on the night of November 13th. The picture that emerged was partial, fragmentary, assembled from witness testimony, geography, and careful elimination. According to investigators' timeline, the girls had left their friend Esther's house at approximately 8 o'clock in the evening. They had been given a lift to the petrol station at the entrance to Picassent. They had been seen walking toward the cooler. And then, according to the woman on the balcony, They had accepted a ride in a small white car, a car already carrying several occupants. The Cooler nightclub was contacted and confirmed the three girls had never arrived. Investigators systematically worked through every possible lead. Friends and acquaintances of the girls were interviewed. Regular patrons of the Cooler were questioned. The club's owners cooperated fully with police. Inmates recently released from the prison at Picassent, a facility located in the same area, were looked into. Known individuals with histories of concerning behavior in the region were investigated. According to records from the time, officers spent 2 full weeks following one such lead, tracking a man whose behavior in a nearby area had drawn attention. None of these investigations produced a breakthrough. The trail, as the weeks turned into months, seemed to lead nowhere. December passed, January arrived. The families continued to search. Fernando Garcia, Miriam's father, refused to stop. He traveled, he gave interviews, he pressed the authorities, he placed posters in languages he didn't speak, in cities he had never visited, in the hope that someone, somewhere, might have seen his daughter. The absence of answers had begun to feel, to those close to the case, like an answer in itself. As the weeks stretched on without any credible sighting, without any trace of the girls' whereabouts, investigators began to confront a reality they had hoped to avoid. The evidence, or rather the absence of it, pointed in a direction that no one wanted to name out loud. The girls had left with almost no money. They had made no contact with their families or friends. There had been no activity on any of the leads pointing toward them having traveled voluntarily. No confirmed sightings, no verified evidence of their presence anywhere in Spain, in Africa, or elsewhere in Europe. According to those familiar with the investigation, the working assumption had quietly but unmistakably shifted. This was no longer being treated as a missing persons case in the conventional sense. Something had happened to Miriam, Tony, and Desiree, something serious. The question was no longer where they were. The question was beginning to be, what may have happened to them? 70 days had passed, then 72, 74. The countryside around Valencia held its silence. Wednesday, January 27, 1993. The Barranco de la Romana, a remote area in the municipality of Tous, roughly 50 kilometers southwest of the city of Valencia and about 12 kilometers north of the Tous Reservoir. The terrain here is rocky and uneven, scrubland, difficult to reach, the kind of place you would only go if you had a specific reason to be there. 2 men had a reason. A 69-year-old beekeeper and his co-father-in-law had come up to the hillside that morning to check on their hives. They had done this before, many times. They knew this land. At around 10 o'clock in the morning, near the location of their hives, they noticed something. A human arm, partially uncovered from the ground. On the wrist, a large watch. The men did not touch what they had found. They went to contact the authorities. A Guardia Civil team was dispatched to the location. The examining judge responsible for the judicial process, José Miguel Bor, based in Alcàsser, was contacted, though it took several hours for him to reach the scene, as he had been attending to another matter in a different municipality. When investigators began to examine the site, the initial reading of the evidence, specifically the size of the watch on the arm, had led some to believe they might be dealing with the remains of a man. That assumption did not last long. What investigators found at the Barranco de la Romana that morning was a large, deliberately excavated pit. Inside it, 3 sets of remains, all female, in an advanced state of deterioration, consistent, according to forensic assessment, with having been there for an extended period of time. According to the judicial record, the remains were wrapped together in a large, new-looking carpet. They were bound, and they had been placed, stacked, according to the documentation, in a way that suggested deliberate, calculated concealment. 2 of the sets of remains showed injuries that the examining team, even at this early stage, noted as severe. The judge declared the proceedings confidential. The remains were transported to the nearby municipality of Lambe, and later that evening transferred to the Forensic Anatomy Institute in Valencia, where they would remain overnight before the formal autopsies could begin. By late that afternoon, the families had been called to the town hall in Alcàsser. They had been told there was news. At around 11 o'clock that night, the president of the Generalitat Valenciana, Joan Lerma, arrived to be with the families. Just before midnight, officials confirmed what the forensic indicators had already suggested. The remains found in the Barranco de la Romana were those of Miriam Garcia Iborra, Maria Deseada Hernandez Folch, and Antonia Gomez Rodriguez. 75 days after they disappeared from a road in the Valencia countryside, the three girls from Alcàsser had been found. The news spread through Spain like a wound opening. 3 days later, a funeral was held at the church of San Martín Obispo in Alcàsser, officiated by the Archbishop of Valencia, Agustín García Gasco. Representatives of the Valencian government attended. The mayor of Valencia was present. Dignitaries came from across the region, and outside, in the streets of this small town, approximately 30,000 people had gathered. They lined the route from the church to the municipal cemetery, a distance of about 700 meters, in silence. Messages of condolence arrived from the King and Queen of Spain, from political leaders across the spectrum, from the Archbishop of Seville, from a country that in its grief found itself standing very still. Among the items found at the site of the pit, near some low scrub brush, investigators discovered several fragments of torn paper. When carefully reassembled, those fragments formed a medical referral document. It had been issued by the Hospital La Fe in Valencia. It bore the name Enrique Anglès Martin. The document related to a consultation for a medical condition months earlier. That same afternoon, January 27, 1993, the Guardia Civil went to the address on record for the Anglès family in the town of Catarroja. What happened next set the entire subsequent investigation in motion. When officers arrived at the Anglès family home, one person, a man named Antonio Anglès, brother of Enrique and a known petty criminal, reacted immediately. According to the Guardia Civil's account, he fled through a window and escaped across the rooftops before officers could reach him. He was 26 years old. Those present at the address, including Enrique Anglès, his sister Kelly, her partner, and their mother, were taken to the Guardia Civil barracks at Patray for questioning while the apartment was searched. Shortly afterward, two other brothers arrived, Mauricio and Ricardo Anglès, accompanied by a friend. That friend's name was Miguel Ricard. He was 23 years old, and he was known to officers as a frequent associate of Antonio Anglès. He was brought in as a witness. The referral document, it quickly became clear, did not implicate Enrique Anglès directly in the events at the Barranco de la Romana. Enrique, who had an intellectual disability, was released that same evening. Miguel Ricard, however, remained. His initial account contained contradictions. Investigators noted the inconsistencies. Combined with his established connection to Antonio Anglès and the fact that his vehicle matched descriptions provided by witnesses, Ricard was formally detained in the early hours of January 28th. Later that night, according to court records, Ricard made his first official declaration before the Guardia Civil. In it, he confessed to involvement in the crime. Over the following days, weeks, and months, Miguel Ricard made a series of declarations before the Guardia Civil, before examining judges, and ultimately before the full court. His accounts were inconsistent. They changed, shifted, expanded, and retracted. The trial court would later devote considerable attention to evaluating which version, if any, most closely matched the physical and forensic evidence. According to court records, Ricard's declaration of January 28th, his first formal statement, placed him at a rural location in the Barranco de la Romana area, together with Antonio Anglès and the three girls. He minimized his own role in those early accounts, describing himself as a reluctant participant who acted under fear of his companion. In subsequent declarations on January 29th and 30th, his account became more detailed. He described the girls being restrained inside a small rural outbuilding in the area. He admitted to a role in the mistreatment of the girls. These statements were made, he would later allege, under coercion. He would eventually claim that his confessions had been extracted by force and that officers had dictated what he should say. However, the court noted that a forensic medical examination conducted on January 30th, the same day he signed his second judicial declaration, found no injuries or signs consistent with physical mistreatment. The most detailed declaration in the case came on March 2, 1993, again before the examining judge in Alcàsser. According to court documents, in this statement, Ricard described in detail the events of the evening of November 13, 1992, including how the girls had been picked up while hitchhiking near Picassant, how they had been taken to the rural outbuilding, how the assaults had occurred, and ultimately, how the girls lost their lives in the early hours of November 14th at the hands, Ricard stated, of Antonio Anglès. He described Anglès as the primary perpetrator. He acknowledged his own participation in the assaults. He stated that both men had at one point during the night left the location to buy food at a bar in the nearby village of Catadau. According to the court's eventual ruling, this declaration, the one of March 2, 1993, was considered the most credible, due to its coherence with the physical and forensic evidence found at the scene. From late March 1993 onward, Ricard reversed his position entirely. He retracted all previous confessions. He offered alternative accounts, at various points suggesting a third individual, whom he referred to as El Pelirrojo, the redhead, had been involved, later suggesting the involvement of Mauricio Anglès, Antonio's younger brother, and later still mentioning a figure known only by the nickname El Nano. Investigators pursued each of these leads. According to court records, none produced evidence of a third or fourth participant. Biological evidence from the relevant locations did not support the involvement of Mauricio Anglès, and no individual matching the description of El Nano was ever identified. On the morning of January 28th, a team of 6 forensic pathologists from Valencia, led by Professor Fernando Verdú Pascual, conducted the formal autopsies on the remains of the 3 girls. The process took 8 hours. The resulting report was submitted to the court 3 months later. At the request of the families, a second, more detailed autopsy was subsequently carried out by Professor Luis Frontella, a specialist brought in independently. This examination was observed by members of the Valencia forensic team and by 2 Guardia Civil officers who documented the process. Professor Frontella's findings introduced additional complexity to the investigation. In his examination of hair samples found on the remains and clothing, Frontella identified 15 hairs of potential evidential value. Of these, 12 did not, based on their physical characteristics, belong to either Miguel Ricard or Antonio Anglès. 3 were too damaged to be analyzed conclusively. DNA analysis of those hair samples was subsequently performed at the Institute of Forensic Medicine in Santiago de Compostela. According to the findings, the genetic profiles identified were consistent with between 5 and 7 distinct individuals. Professor Frontella noted, based on this evidence, that the participation of at least 2 individuals was indicated, and that the overall picture was more consistent with the involvement of 3 or more people. This finding would become one of the most debated elements of the entire case. Frontella also raised concerns about the state of the remains relative to the estimated time of death. Based on his analysis of insect activity, which he was only able to examine through photographs and video taken during the first autopsy, he suggested the evidence did not fully align with what might be expected if the remains had been at a single location for the entire 75-day period. From this, he drew the conclusion that the girls' remains may have been moved from one location to the Barranco de la Romana at some point prior to their discovery. The court noted these observations. They were among the case's unresolved questions. While Miguel Ricard remained in custody, Antonio Anglès, considered by investigators to be the principal figure in the events of that night, had vanished. And then, In the spring of 1993, a trail appeared, however briefly, before disappearing again into the ocean. In March 1993, a police informant in Portugal reported having shared accommodation with a man he believed to be Antonio Anglés for approximately 2 weeks in the coastal town of Caparica, south of Lisbon. According to this account, the individual, who had stolen the informant's passport, had spoken of his intention to board a ship bound for Brazil, the country where Anglés had been born. On March 15, 1993, the crew of the merchant ship City of Plymouth discovered a stowaway on board. According to the ship's records, when the individual was discovered, he went overboard into the sea, wearing a life jacket. The life jacket was later recovered near the entrance to the harbor. The person who had been wearing it was never found. Whether Antonio Anglés disappeared into the waters off the Portuguese coast, or whether he survived and began a new life somewhere in the world, remains unknown. Investigators did not stop looking. In September 1995, a skull found on a beach in County Cork, Ireland, was analyzed for a possible connection to Anglés, due to a physical characteristic the skull shared with him. DNA testing ruled out the match. In March 1996, 2 Guardia Civil officers traveled to Uruguay after a reported sighting there that matched Anglés's description. The lead came to nothing. Today, Antonio Anglés appears on Interpol's list of the world's most wanted individuals. He has not been seen, confirmed, or captured since January 1993. The trial relating to the events at Alcàsser was held at the Provincial Court of Valencia between May and July of 1997. More than 4 years had passed since the discovery of the remains at the Barranco de la Romana. No. There was only one defendant. Miguel Ricard faced charges of kidnapping, assault, homicide, and illegal burial. Antonio Anglés, the man identified by investigators as the principal perpetrator, remained at large and therefore could not be tried. The trial proceeded under intense media scrutiny, a scrutiny that would generate its own controversies, which we will address shortly. Ricard, appearing before the court, denied all involvement in the crimes. He stated categorically that every confession he had made since January 1993 had been obtained under duress, through physical and psychological pressure applied by Guardia Civil officers. He told the court that agents had instructed him precisely what to say and that he had said it only to end the mistreatment. The court examined these allegations carefully. According to the ruling, the forensic medical examinations carried out in 1993, on January 30th, and again after Ricard first raised the claim of mistreatment in late March of that year, found no injuries, no signs of physical trauma, and nothing consistent with the allegations he described. The court concluded that the March 2nd, the 1993 declaration remained the most credible of Ricard's various accounts, based on its internal consistency and its correspondence with the physical evidence assembled across the investigation. On September 5, 1997, the court delivered its verdict. Miguel Ricard was found guilty. He was sentenced to 170 years in prison and ordered to pay compensation to the families of the 3 girls. The court's findings established Ricard as a necessary accomplice in the events and a participant in the kidnapping and assaults. Antonio Anglés, still absent, still unnamed before a court, still unaccounted for, was the figure the ruling identified as the primary perpetrator, a perpetrator who, as of today, has never faced justice. Miguel Ricard served his sentence in several Spanish prisons, including the facility at Herrera de la Mancha in Ciudad Real. His case intersected in 2011 with a significant legal debate. The Spanish Supreme Court at that time affirmed the application of what was known as the Parot Doctrine to Ricard's sentence, a legal principle affecting how sentence reductions were calculated for crimes of this severity. In 2013, however, the European Court of Human Rights struck down the Parot Doctrine as incompatible with the European Convention on Human Rights. As a result, on November 29, 2013, having served approximately 20 years in custody, Miguel Ricard was released. His release was met with public anger. For many in Spain, and particularly in Alcàsser, 20 years had felt insufficient. In January 2021, according to police reports, Ricard was identified by the National Police at a squatted property in the Carabanchel district of Madrid. In January 2023, he gave an interview to a YouTube channel in which he once again denied any involvement in the crimes. In those same conversations, he described Antonio Anglés in stark terms, characterizing him as a figure devoid of humanity or feeling. Whether Ricard's final account of events, or any of his many accounts, represents the full truth of what happened in the Barranco de la Romana in November 1992 is a question that only those who were present that night can answer. The legal proceedings and their conclusions did not close the public conversation about the Alcàsser case. Far from it. From the beginning, Fernando Garcia, the father of Miriam, had been an intensely active presence in the investigation. He had traveled, searched, and pushed authorities at every stage. His grief was public and unrelenting, and it commanded both sympathy and attention. After the discovery of the remains, and as the legal process unfolded, Garcia became convinced that the official version of events did not represent the whole truth. He was joined in this conviction by Juan Ignacio Blanco, a crime journalist who had come to Alcàsser shortly after the disappearance and had established himself as an unofficial investigator of the case. Blanco moved to the area and devoted years to building an alternative account of what he believed had actually occurred. Together, Garcia and Blanco became regular guests on several high-profile television programs throughout 1997, in particular the Telecinco program Esta Noche Cruzamos el Mississippi, hosted by Pepe Navarro, and the Canal 9 program El Juez d'Alcàsser. Their theory, as they presented it, held that Ricard and Anglés were not the primary architects of the crime, but rather individuals acting under the direction of a powerful criminal network. According to this theory, a group of influential politicians and businessmen were allegedly involved in the production of what are known as snuff recordings, films purporting to show real acts of violence. Garcia and Blanco alleged that the three girls had been victims of this network, held at multiple locations before the final events took their lives, and that the true perpetrators had been protected by those in positions of power. It is important to be precise here about what was claimed and what was verified. The alternative theory presented by Garcia and Blanco contained no verified evidence. It relied, in significant part, on speculation, on information later found to be fabricated, and on accusations that were ultimately ruled to be unlawful by Spanish courts. On January 29, 1997, during a live broadcast of Esta Noche Cruzamos el Mississippi, Garcia and Blanco named three specific individuals, providing their full names on national television, and accused them of belonging to a criminal network involved in the crime. The three men named all had connections to the Socialist Party, which had been in government at the time. No evidence was presented in support of these accusations. In May 1997, the same week the trial against Ricard opened, the weekly magazine Interview published an investigation revealing that Garcia and Blanco had been manipulated. According to Interview's reporting, a former business associate of the three named men had provided fabricated information to Blanco as an act of personal revenge related to an unconnected property dispute in Madrid. Two of the three men named on television pursued legal action. The program's producer, Pepe Navarro, eventually acknowledged the harm caused and paid a substantial financial settlement to avoid trial. Fernando Garcia and Juan Ignacio Blanco, despite later retracting their statements and issuing apologies, were found guilty of criminal defamation by Spanish courts. In June 2009, following separate legal proceedings relating to statements made during the television coverage of the trial, a Spanish court found Fernando Garcia guilty of a continuous course of serious defamatory statements made in a public forum, ordering him to pay over €270,000 in damages, plus a criminal fine. Juan Ignacio Blanco, received a 2-year prison sentence and was ordered to pay over 260,000 euros in compensation. Radio Televisión Valenciana, the broadcaster, was held to bear subsidiary civil responsibility for the statements made on its platform. Blanco died in 2019, having maintained until the end of his life that he possessed video evidence supporting his version of events. The existence of such evidence was disputed by multiple parties, including the parish priest of Alcàsser, who denied having delivered any such material, and by Fernando Garcia himself, who stated he had never seen it. The alternative theory, as constructed by Garcia and Blanco, was not accepted by any court. It produced no verified evidence of a wider criminal network, no confirmed additional perpetrators, and no substantiated contradiction of the judicial findings regarding Ricard and Anglès. This does not mean that every question raised in the case was answered. Some were not. The Alcàsser case, even after the verdict, left behind a number of genuinely unresolved questions, points of uncertainty that various analysts, journalists, and forensic specialists have raised over the years. These questions are worth acknowledging, not because they validate any specific alternative theory, but because intellectual honesty requires us to distinguish between what was proven and what remains unclear. The DNA analysis of hair samples conducted on evidence found during the second autopsy indicated genetic material consistent with between 5 and 7 individuals, only 2 of whom were identified as Ricard and Anglès. The remaining profiles were not matched to any known individual. The court acknowledged this finding, but concluded it was not sufficient evidence to establish the presence of additional perpetrators. The medical referral document that first led investigators to the Anglès family was found in fragments near the pit, exposed to the elements in a windswept area of countryside, apparently for approximately 2.5 months. How it survived intact enough to be reassembled and read is a question some observers have noted. Biological material from the 3 girls was not identified in the rural outbuilding where, according to Ricard's account, the assaults had taken place. Investigators noted this, though the court concluded the absence of such material did not contradict the overall evidentiary picture. And the question of whether the girls' remains had been moved, whether they had been at one location before being transferred to the Barranco de la Romana, was raised by Professor Frontela, but never definitively resolved. These are not conspiracy theories. They are documented uncertainties, the kind that exist in many complex criminal investigations, and that honest accounts of those investigations should not pretend away. The full picture of everyone present on that night is something that only Antonio Anglès, wherever he may be, could complete. The Alcàsser case did not only transform the lives of those directly connected to it, it also transformed Spanish media. In the weeks when the girls were missing, television programs like Quién Sabe Dónde, a program dedicated to helping families find missing loved ones, hosted by Paco Lobaton on public broadcaster TVE, provided genuine public service. The program helped keep the case visible and encouraged hundreds of ordinary citizens to contribute information. But on the evening of January 27, 1993, the night the discovery was announced, something else happened. A program called De Tu a Tu, broadcast on Antena 3 and hosted by Nieves Herrero and Olga Viza, moved its entire production to Alcàsser and broadcast live from there as the night's events unfolded. The families of the girls were present in the studio, if a parking lot in a small town could be called that. Their grief was broadcast in real time as increasingly distressing details about the state of the remains emerged. The studio audience, composed of local residents, applauded at points during the broadcast. The program and its host received widespread and sustained criticism for the manner in which it handled events that evening, whereas many media analysts and critics in Spain subsequently identified that night, the night of January 27, 1993, as the moment when a particular strain of exploitative television entered the Spanish broadcasting landscape. a debate about the responsibilities of media in the coverage of tragedy that Spain is still having today. During the 1997 trial, the problematic media coverage continued. Programs devoted to the case, including Esta Noche, Cruzamos el Mississippi, and the daily Canal 9 program El Juez d'Alcàsser, raised serious ethical questions about the limits of journalism in the pursuit of audience figures. Material from the autopsies was shown. Discussion of the most sensitive details of the victim's final hours was conducted as entertainment. And in the print press, the case produced one of the more extraordinary examples of journalistic fabrication in modern Spanish history. In April 1997, a national newspaper published a purported interview with the fugitive Antonio Anglès, complete with photographs. The Guardia Civil immediately stated the photographs were not of Anglès. 2 months later, an investigation published by the magazine Interview confirmed what many suspected. The interview was fabricated. The photographs showed an Argentine model who stated he had been unaware of how they would be used. The newspaper's director resigned. The episode, one of many, illustrated the extent to which the Alcàsser case had become a vehicle for commercial exploitation rather than a subject for careful journalism. The physical investigation of the Alcàsser case did not end in 1993. In February 2017, 25 years after the events, forensic anthropologist Francisco Echeverria was at the site of the Barranco de la Romana in connection with a television documentary marking the anniversary. During his examination of the area, he discovered a human tooth, a premolar, near the location of the original pit. Both Echeverria and the Guardia Civil concluded the tooth was most likely associated with the victims. However, the scientific team was unable to extract viable DNA from it. No confirmation was possible. Then, in June 2019, 2 individuals who had gone to the site out of curiosity found something else. 4 bone fragments, initially visible at the surface, with others discovered just below the ground. The individuals who found them brought them to the nearest Guardia Civil barracks. Initial examination suggested the fragments might be animal, but subsequent analysis, conducted both by the Institute of Forensic Medicine in Valencia and by Professor Echeverria, concluded they were human. Specifically, 4 phalanges, small finger bones. In November 2020, DNA analysis confirmed that the 4 phalanges found in June 2019 belonged to Miriam Garcia Iborra. 27 years after her remains had first been found and removed from that hillside, part of her was still there, waiting in the earth. In the investigating court number 6 of Alzira, the search for Antonio Anglès remains, technically, an open investigation. In 2020 and 2021, the presiding magistrate took testimony from several members of the crew of the City of Plymouth, the merchant vessel from which a stowaway had disappeared in the waters off Portugal in March 1993. According to the court's inquiry, investigators are seeking to clarify whether the individual who went overboard from that vessel was, in fact, Antonio Anglès, and whether he received assistance from anyone on board. 2 surviving crew members stated their belief that the stowaway had received help from others on the ship and provided names of 2 individuals they believed to have been involved. Both of those individuals have since died. Investigators are also attempting to locate a photograph reportedly taken of the stowaway before the vessel reached Ireland, which might assist in confirming or ruling out the identity of the man involved. In October 2021, the court ordered new forensic examinations, including DNA analysis of more than 50 hair samples that had been set aside during the investigations of the 1990s. The examination of Ricart's vehicle and a second car associated with the case was also ordered. In March 2022, it was confirmed that no viable DNA had been recovered from those additional analyses. The objective of these continuing investigations is twofold: to build the most complete possible evidentiary record against Anglès in the event that he is ever located and prosecuted before the statute of limitations expires, and to answer, as fully as possible, the questions that still linger over the events of November 13, 1992. One of the most painful dimensions of the case's long aftermath was the fracture it caused between the families of the three victims. Rosa Folch, the mother of Desiree, did not share Fernando Garcia's belief in the alternative theory. She made her position clear, and consistently so. She believed the official account was substantially correct. She disagreed profoundly with the way Garcia and Blanco were using the media platform they had built, including, in her view, the exploitation of her daughter's name and memory in service of claims she considered unfounded. In July 1997, Folch issued a public statement calling on Garcia to stop using Desiree's name in his fundraising activities. When Garcia announced the creation of a foundation to be called the Niñas de Alcàsser, Girls of Alcàsser, Folch mobilized legal representation to prevent the registration of that name. In April 1998, the General Secretariat for Social Affairs ruled in Folch's favor. The foundation could not be registered under that name without her consent, as doing so would violate the rights to dignity, privacy, and personal image belonging to Desiree and her family. The foundation was never officially created. Subsequent legal proceedings found evidence that funds solicited in the foundation's name had not been directed toward the stated purposes. Garcia was ultimately not convicted. The court found the standard of proof insufficient, but the episode damaged his standing significantly in the community of Alcàsser. Rosa Folch also pursued legal action over a book published by Juan Ignacio Blanco in 1998, which contained sensitive forensic photographs from the autopsy proceedings. A court ordered the book's withdrawal from sale in August of that year. These disputes, conducted in courts and across television screens for years, added layers of pain to an already devastating story. Three mothers and fathers, each trying in their own way to honor three girls who had not deserved what happened to them, divided in the end by the very case that had brought their lives together. We return, at the end, to where we began. A road, 2 kilometers of ordinary asphalt between two small towns in the province of Valencia. A road that thousands of people had used before that evening. And thousands have used since. On the night of November 13, 1992, 3 girls walked onto it. They were 14 and 15 years old. They were going to a party. They were laughing, almost certainly. They were talking about whatever 14 and 15-year-olds talk about when they are happy and alive and full of Friday night. A white car stopped. They got in. And after that, everything changed. For them, for their families, for their town, for Spain. The court found Miguel Ricard guilty. He served his sentence and was released. Antonio Angles was never found. He remains, according to Interpol, one of the world's most wanted fugitives, though whether he is still alive is unknown. The questions that surround the night of November 13th, the questions that were never fully answered in any courtroom, in any forensic laboratory, in any investigative file, remain open in a way that time is not closed. What is not open to question is this: Miriam Garcia Iborra, Maria Deseada Hernandez Folch, Antonia Gomez Rodriguez, 3 young women, 3 lives that were taken from them before they had barely begun. They deserved more than what happened to them on that road. They deserved more than what happened to their memory in the years that followed. The cameras, the programs, the accusations, the books, the noise. They deserved the simple, ordinary future that was taken from them on a November night on a dark road in a small town that still carries their names. The road is still there. It still connects Alcàsser to Picassent. People still drive it every day. Most of them don't think about what happened here. But some of them do.